Welcome to the BePure Podcast. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the talk we never got, all things hormones and sex with Beatrice Thorne. Beatrice is the General Manager and one of the founders of Eve Wellness, our sister company here at the BePure Group. With an extensive hormone journey of her own, she's made it her mission to learn everything she can about hormones, periods, and sex, and to empower others to do the same. Beatrice is passionate about inspiring others to take control of their sexual well-being and driven to equip women with the tools and information they need to make informed decisions about their hormonal health. Welcome, Beatrice. So nice to have you here.
Hi, Lisa. It's lovely to chat with you.
I always love hearing how people get into this space, and it usually starts with a personal story or a personal journey. So I would love for you to tell our audience about your hormonal journey, some of the struggles you face with your health, and how this kind of got you into the well-being space and Eve Wellness.
Totally. Well, for starters, for everybody listening, Lisa is actually my personal nutritionist and practitioner and has been probably for the last 4 years or so. So she has seen me through a lot of the journey that I will tell you all about. So massive gratitude to Lisa, and you probably have, Lisa, a slightly different take on the whole thing to mine. So if you ever have any bits where you want to jump in, feel free. But from my perspective, my kind of hormone journey that brought me to everything we're doing with Eve really started when I decided to come off the pill. So that was at a time when I was going to Ben Warren seminars. This was probably 6 years ago, maybe more. Probably about 6 years ago now. And I decided to come off the pill. I was, revolutionizing my diet. I was getting more nutrients in. I was just going through a time where I was wanting to make choices that for me felt healthier and more aligned. And alongside that, for me, taking the pill was something that I felt like stopping so that I could get more in tune with my natural body, see what my hormones were up to, because I'd been on the pill for almost 10 years, and I didn't really know what my natural cycle was like. And I was also scared about who I was underneath the pill, because it would get to the week of having the sugar pills or whatever, and, my moods would change quite drastically. I'd get really down, I'd get snappy, and I was like, shit, when I don't take my pill, I don't like who I am, and I don't know who I am. I don't recognize this person. So there was also quite a lot of fear around coming off the pill for me, but I wanted to lean into that and get past it. So I came off the pill, and I had done some research online, and I thought probably after 3 months my cycle should come back, because that's what I had read. It didn't. After 6 months, it didn't come back, and I was kind of thinking, okay, this is interesting. It got to the year mark, and I was starting to get really concerned, and I didn't know anything about hormones and really not a lot about health in general at this time, and I started being concerned that I had done serious damage to my body, that, perhaps I had made myself infertile through being on the pill for so long or something like that. I just didn't know. And it was around this time that I started working with BePure as an employee, but obviously that gave me access to amazing people like you. And I was also just consuming information at an extreme rate through podcasts and reading research and reading articles and all sorts of things to try and figure out what was going on. And there just wasn't a lot out there at the time that was really helping. And then I did my first ever hormone test. And that was such a turning point for me, because it really just showed, basically my results showed that I had low, really, really low kind of postmenopausal range estrogen and zero progesterone, which explained a lot of what was going on. And it was just such a relief to know that I wasn't broken. Mm-hmm. And that all that was happening was my body just wasn't producing enough of those natural hormones yet for me to actually have a cycle, hence why my period hadn't come back. So that was super empowering to actually know, do you know what? Your body just needs some love and attention in order to help you rebuild. So that was just absolutely mind-blowing for me. And then my period did finally come back after 2 years, which was great. 2 years was a long time, I know. 3 cheers for periods. But the journey didn't stop there. So it came back with a bang. It was quite dramatic. And it came back with extreme fatigue that would last up to 2 weeks every month, to the point where I found it difficult walking up the slight hill to go to the supermarket. And it came with acne that I'd never had before in my life, menstrual headaches that would go on for a few days, weight gain and a lot of water retention, really messing with my moods. I was feeling incredibly low and anxious. Again, things that I hadn't really experienced previously. Basically, you name the hormonal symptom, I had it for 2 weeks a month, pretty much. And honestly, looking back, I really don't know how I made it through that time, because 2 out of the 4 weeks every month was a lot of my life to be really struggling.
Yep.
And over time, my job started suffering. I'd be sitting at work and the brain fog was so severe that I'd be just thinking, wow, I hope no one comes to talk to me today, because I don't know if I could string a sentence together. And my relationship suffered because I didn't have the energy to go out and engage with friends, things like that. So it really just wasn't much of a life. And obviously I got through it with a lot of support from the team at BePure, and through my own research. And we came out the other side through a lot of diet, lifestyle and supplement implementations. But it really left me just feeling incredibly passionate about helping other people on that path, because what I realized is I'm not the only one experiencing those things, but no one else was talking about it. There was basically no support available. And if I hadn't happened to be working with people who could help me day to day and help me realize what I needed to do, I don't know how long it would have taken for me to get through that. And I would have felt so much more alone and desperate. So I really wanted to do something to try and make it easier for other women in the future.
Amen. And I think, like you say, the journey that you describe is quite common. And we see it lots in our clinical practice, where women come off any kind of hormonal contraceptive, the pill, Depo-Provera, sometimes even the Mirena, and they find they're like, whoa, we have to kind of go through puberty again, where we get these massive swings at estrogen that come through, creating monster amounts of inflammation, depending on what's going on in the body. That adds to the fatigue. You then figure out you may have been pushing yourself a touch too hard because you had these synthetic hormones masking the impact of stress on your life.
Yeah, 100%. And the pill is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about talking about, and I want to make it clear I'm definitely not anti-pill. I think it is such a fantastic intervention for millions of women around the world who need that support for whatever reason. Maybe they've got a condition like endometriosis and they really need something to help them manage that, or they're at a stage in their life where getting pregnant would be extremely detrimental and they really need some help to manage that. So 100% on board. However, I would potentially suggest that in our modern way of doing life, how we are using the pill could potentially be relooked at. And an example I'll use for this is Eve recently supported a charity called the Period Place. So as you know, we donated, I think it was like 2,600 menstrual packs of menstrual pads to the Period Place, and we went and chatted to them when we were giving the donation. It was so nice.
So good, yeah.
It was so nice. But going and chatting to them when we gave the donation, it was really eye-opening to hear from them some stories of how the pill is being used. So the one that really stuck with me the most was there is a lot of rural communities still in New Zealand, and they were describing a few rural communities up in Northland where children as young as 7 are starting to menstruate. And because they're so rural, they don't have access to shops where they sell period products. And so their local healthcare workers are prescribing the pill to 7-year-olds. And while I get it, they're trying to give the support that they can to these families that don't have access to the products and education really that they need. I get it, but I do worry about preventing people from going through adolescence and the impact that will potentially have. And I feel as though we may be letting down some of our young people and not providing them with the education and access that they need, both to information about how our bodies work, how we can be supporting them, what's normal through that adolescent phase when it comes to your cycle, and then just what should be the basics, which is period products. Because there is, one of the most common things that we hear is mothers saying, oh, my daughter's 15 and her cycles are irregular and she gets pain and cranky every now and again, what can I be giving her? And as you know, it's kind of just a time where that's normal. And a lot of teenagers can present with PCOS type symptoms, but actually that's kind of just their natural hormonal rhythm trying to find how to do its dance. And that's what that, puberty to kind of the age of 25 is about. It's about the body getting into this rhythm that it will do for the next few decades that will allow us to procreate and, do all the things we do.
Totally. And I
that
think
was a bit of a tangent.
No, it's a great tangent. Love it. Absolutely love it. And I think you're 100% right. I mean, my heart broke when you said a 7-year-old. I think that age to go through puberty, mentally so confusing and challenging, part one. So that's a whole conversation around early puberty, I think. And then what do you do with that, and how do you help those kids and those families to cope with that transition happening so early? But also,
100%.
Like you say, what does that mean if you shut off their menstrual cycle at a really early age to eventually let them go through puberty later on? What does that mean for their health, their well-being, et cetera, et cetera? Such an interesting area. But then also equally agree with you on the development of periods. The beginning usually isn't that awesome. You can actually fix a lot of the challenges by just focusing on good food, mitigating stress, which I think is quite common for a lot of kids these days. I see it amongst my dancing students a lot. Just being everywhere, doing all the things and worrying about missing out on all the stuff because they now have things like Instagram, which has got lots of good uses, but also has a lot of things that come with it that can be psychologically stressful for a young person and for adults. So twos and fro's, eh?
100%.
So you mentioned about your journey yourself that there was a part where coming off, being on the pill and coming off the pill, there was an impact on your relationships. Did that impact your sex drive part of your relationship as well?
I was kind of okay in that area, but it is really, really common, and our hormones play such an important role when it comes to our libido and sex drive. And part of that is, well, for starters, our libido is actually a marker for good health that a lot of us don't really pay attention to. And I think we can kind of think about it as though our sex drive, a desire to have sex, is an innate desire to procreate. And that, that's not necessarily the sexiest way of thinking about it, but from a primal brain perspective, this is the truth. And our bodies are so intelligent that when they're not thriving, they are less inclined to create new life because of the toll that pregnancy, breastfeeding, and being a parent takes on our bodies and how many nutrients, etc., are required to make a human. So loss of libido can be a sign that your body, or potentially your mind, needs a little bit of love. And so alongside contraception or coming off contraception or missing periods, we also see things like other health conditions, stress, some medications, poor diet, alcohol, lack of sleep, poor nutrient intake. All of these things can impact libido quite a lot, as well as then, away from the physical side and onto the mental side, also the health of your relationship or relationships. And this might be your relationship with yourself, or your relationship with your partner. And I say yourself because if your self-image, your self-love, how you feel about yourself is not thriving, the desire to be vulnerable and intimate with another person might not necessarily be there for you because you're not feeling comfortable to be intimate with yourself. And so I think that is an area that people often overlook. They often are looking for the external, whereas sometimes it can be really helpful if somebody is dealing with low libido to look inside and say, okay, where am I not actually feeling as though I can be intimate with myself? And having a little bit of a look there first, as well as obviously the relationship with your partner as well.
I think you touched on a really nice point there where, for me, when people say to me I'm struggling with my libido and it relates psychologically, I often think about the sense of safety. And
100%.
to be truly vulnerable, right, you have to feel really comfortable in your own skin. You have to be like, yeah, I'm naked. This all good. Don't worry about it. These are boobs. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Here.
Yeah, right? And be like, come on, I'm hot. Bring it on. You have to have that feeling of safety in yourself and comfortability in your own skin to want to really share that with somebody. And it's so much more fun when they can do the same. And you just have this amazing shared experience. It's that whole, I guess, saying of 1 and 1 makes 3. Figuratively, when it comes to making a baby, yes, but when it comes to energy and bonding, it sort of adds that extra something to the table. And I find it so fascinating how stress for women in particular really seems to create a negative conversation with their bodies as well.
Absolutely. Well, we're trained that that's the first place our minds go to, right? You know, we are perfectly conditioned that looking good equals being enough. And that's how we are. And so when stress comes, the first place we look to is, I don't look good enough. I'm not enough. I don't believe in myself. You know, and it really, I think, as you say, stress and our self-worth are so closely linked because when we're down, that's the first place we go to.
100%. And I think it's, I always find it really interesting when clients say to me, Lisa, I feel fat. I'm like, you feel being the key things for me to pick up on, not I am, or I know I need to change my body composition. It's usually I feel. And I'm like, what is that feeling thing that you're describing? And what have you internalized or reflected inward on yourself that you could work through and progress out of?
Totally. And when I think about myself and when I've had that exact thing, when there have been times when I've felt fat, what I mean is I feel undesirable. I feel not enough. I feel less than. And that's what that means. But I think we're so, like we were saying earlier, we're so primed to equate skinny with good that those feelings of undesirability or low self-worth can often translate into that.
Totally agree. I mean, sex drive, I think, is a really interesting one. And when we see it come through like the Eve test, I guess, stuff as well, we look through all the report pre-work to kind of make an evaluation of what's going on for the individual and then marry that up with the massive amounts of results we do. I always find it really interesting how many women are kind of looking for that one solution to that one problem. Like, I just want you to tell me which hormone in my panel is going to give me back my sex drive and make me feel like a sexy goddess again. And sometimes those panels come back like yours did way back when, where there's like nothing in there. And you're like, yeah, there's no estrogen for making you feel like a sexy goddess. So we need to help lift those ovaries back up and get you nutrified to want to procreate. And others, hormones are normal. And you're thinking, what else is part of this equation? And then you look through maybe the questionnaires and go, oh, look, gut symptoms. They feel bloated and they have problems with diarrhea, or maybe there's massive skin challenges like eczema or acne. And you think, what does that do to your psychological state and your sense of confidence? And that then maybe flows on to your sense of, I'd like to be a sexy human. So it's so interesting. So interesting.
It really is. And I think you touch on a really important point there around how our natural hormones have such a close relationship with our libido, but all of them in a different way. And there is, I think, an expectation that we just are able to get in the mood and feel into it at all times. But naturally, that's actually not the case. And our natural hormones have the ability to bring up or lower our libido depending on where in our monthly cycle we are. And so that's completely natural for a libido to fluctuate. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, sometimes I'm just really not into it, and then other times I really am, no, that's totally normal. And so you might want to start tracking your cycle and looking at, you know, when you feel that and when you don't. And what we would expect to see is in the follicular phase, so this is just the week or so after your period, that's when estrogen and testosterone are rising. So both of these hormones are really closely associated with libido. These two are your libido drivers, hormonally speaking. And so as they're rising, you would expect your libido to be doing the same thing. So that's a time when you can expect to be feeling a little bit more like getting into it. And then that really peaks in the ovulatory phase of your cycle. So this is days 14 to 18 of a regular cycle, around then. And This is because basically Mother Nature wasn't born yesterday. You know, she's been honing her craft for a good few millennia right now. And she's figured out that in order to increase our chances of continuing the human race, she needed to make us the horniest when we're fertile.
Amen to that.
So this is the 3 to 5 days around ovulation. And at the end of the day, we're primates, we're animals who are driven to procreate. And so naturally, when we're ovulating is when we're going to feel the most like getting into it. That's then followed by the luteal phase. So this can be, for some, a less sexy time. So this is because estrogen and testosterone have really peaked during ovulation, and then they start to fall, making way for progesterone, ideally, to become the dominant hormone during that second half of the cycle. And as a hormone, progesterone is like less of a sex kitten and has more of a chilled out, relaxed nature to it. And that doesn't mean that you won't want to have sex at all. But hormonally speaking, the fires aren't burning quite so brightly. And then, you know, the period phase is actually kind of an interesting one because some people have zero interest in sex at all during their period, whereas others find it quite a turned on time. And it's kind of interesting. And there's quite a lot of different theories and studies around why this might be the case, because as we were saying earlier, evolution has chosen to boost our libido when we are the most fertile. So why would we feel desire when we're menstruating and cannot conceive? And there's a few kind of hormonal and physical theories going around here. So firstly is that day one of your period is counted as day one of a brand new cycle. So that's why when you go to the doctor, they always ask, what's the first day of your last period? Because they're trying to figure out where you are in your cycle and whether that might be influencing whatever it is you're seeing them about. And so a day or so into your period, your cycle and your estrogen levels will start to pick back up. And for some of us, this little bump is enough to kick that libido into gear, meaning that you're like, oh, hi.
What's your name?
Yeah.
You come here often? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. But there are also a few physical reasons why we might feel hornier on our periods. So when we are menstruating, blood flow to the pelvis and genital regions does increase, leading to more sensitivity and engorgement, and kind of like how blood flow to the penis causes an erection. This blood flow increases sensitivity for us too, and that can make us much more easily aroused. And a second kind of theory that I have been reading around is something that scientists are continuing to explore, but is that as our uterus expands and contracts during menstruation, it can put pressure on the nerves in the pelvic region, again triggering arousal. So there's a lot of stuff happening. To explain why people might be like, do you know what? I could go now. You know,
I'm game.
Even though. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, for a lot of people, particularly people who experience period pain, period sex can actually be really nice to help relieve some of that pain and be quite an enjoyable experience.
Hello, oxytocin, our love connection hormone, skin to skin, really calming, really relaxing, soothing. Yeah.
Natural pain relief.
Perfect stuff. Yeah. And I think it's lifting that taboo around it as well. Like I think a lot of girls actually feel like they would like to experience that, but they'd be like, oh, I'm bleeding. I'm not sure about how that works. And then bringing your partner on that journey and them not being, quote unquote, grossed out by it. Because it's something to experience, you know. It's something that either you want to give a go or you don't. And if that's you, then go for gold.
Personal preference all the way.
Totally. So that's our natural cycle. What about if we're on some sort of hormonal contraceptive? What does that do to our libido?
So basically everything I just said doesn't apply if you're on hormonal contraception.
Control out, delete. Okay, cool. Got it.
Yeah. So there is a bit to unpack here. So I'll preface this by saying this goes for the pill, the implant, rod, depot injection, etc. And that's because these types of contraception override your natural hormone production as they introduce their own synthetic hormones into your system to take over. So basically the synthetic forms tell your brain, hey, don't worry, we've got this. No need to make that other stuff. We're in now. And the synthetic forms of hormones don't do the same thing as our natural forms. It's kind of like how artificial flowers do the job of looking pretty, but they don't have the same smell and feel and, just niceness.
And progression from beautiful bud to gorgeous flower, and then...
Exactly. And then cycle of life. It's more of a consistent state. And that is exactly the same, with those synthetic forms of hormones. And one of the potential side effects of these is a lowered libido. And this is because your natural levels of estrogen and testosterone, as we said earlier, these are the main hormones that drive libido. Those are decreased. Therefore, where's the hormones to drive libido? And remarkably, as we've discussed previously, clinically, we've seen that low libido is so common within pill users, especially the combination pill that has synthetic forms of both estrogen and progesterone and is more likely to lead to reduced testosterone levels. But interestingly, in the research, there are still people who are questioning this, although an overall review done by a university in Spain in 2019 did conclude that birth control could influence different aspects of sexual function, including libido. So we are starting to reach scientifically some conclusions here around agreeing, yes, actually birth control does impact libido. But outside of that side of it, lower levels of natural estrogen and testosterone in those who use birth control may also make sex less enjoyable, meaning that you may want to actually have it less. So examples of this would be low natural estrogen can cause vaginal dryness, which is not necessarily the one for super enjoyable sex. And low testosterone can actually impact how sensitive you are, so it might not even feel as good as it did before. Birth control can also make you prone to yeast infections like thrush and candida due to its impact on your microbiome, both gut and vaginal, which is very much not conducive to wanting to have sex. And that's, one of the reasons why we massively recommend probiotics for those on birth control, and why we made Queen V one of our Eve supplements, which is a probiotic for gut and vaginal health, to try and support that in pill users. And we even made a pack Better Together on birth control with our Take Me With the Pill supplement and Queen V, so that we're kind of really supporting your body while you're on birth control. And actually, low nutrient levels is another thing that's highly correlated with low libido. And so if you're someone who's been on birth control for a long time and you've noticed that your libido has dipped over time, nutrient depletion could be contributing to that. So the pill and hormonal birth control have been shown through so many studies to deplete key nutrients and minerals from the body, like selenium, zinc, B vitamins, vitamin E, etc., etc. And so, that's why we may take them with the pill.
Totally. And to echo that, there's actually papers that show that there's a recommendation for pill users to take a multivitamin specifically designed for pill users. There's actually papers that state that in the conclusions. They're like, we recommend that this should probably be a thing and we should probably give both of them together. You're like, well, cool. Where was the formulation, guys? Oh, wait, we made it for you. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Hey, guys, have you met Eve?
Yeah.
Hey. They're doing some really good things in this space.
Yeah, totally. I love it. So what about the sort of, I guess, on the pill, off the pill? Let me back that up, actually. Just for those of you that are listening that are taking either a mini pill or using the Mirena, they're probably the better of all of them when it comes to choosing an option if the pill does affect your sex drive, because they're the ones that can enable us still to ovulate and have some of our own hormone production in the background. So I think it's good to know if you are choosing an option, they're the better of the ones if you know that it's going to impact you or have experienced that before or already struggle with, just as an empowerment piece, because often it's a matter of...
Copper.
Yeah, copper as well. Yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah. So in terms of next question I had in my brain, sorry to back it up, is what about the big O? What about the victim orgasm and what it does for our health and our well-being?
Yeah. Well, we've already touched on this a little bit with oxytocin that we mentioned earlier. So basically when we orgasm, we feel satisfied and happy thanks to a flood of hormones and neurotransmitters like oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins that get released when we climax. And these hormones come with so many lovely benefits. So sleep being one of them. Oxytocin helps calm the nervous system, creating a really nice biological environment for melatonin production, being our sleep hormone. Happiness and connection, and this is one that we kind of mentioned earlier. And basically, because of the nervous system relaxation that happens thanks to dopamine and oxytocin, Orgasms are really good for getting more chill, relaxation, stress release, or boost of happiness, or feelings of connection coming on. It's a lovely time. Skin. So people joke about glowing after an orgasm, but it's actually a thing. So orgasms have been compared to a natural retinol that with consistent and ongoing usage can help with skin aging and appearance. And one study actually even found that people with high oxytocin levels have lower age scores, so more youthful looking skin.
Wow.
Than people with low oxytocin levels. So it's a pretty good one. And then the final thing I think is great about orgasms, and we mentioned this kind of earlier around period pain and orgasms, is orgasms are really good for reducing inflammation. So they increase circulation and decrease cortisol and stress levels. So they're a really lovely tool for anyone dealing with any kind of inflammatory condition to get some good stuff going.
Amazing. Yeah. It's sort of like you mentioned the oxytocin, the endorphins, the kind of dopamine hit. And explains why my husband falls asleep straight afterwards. He's just like, thank you. This is really good.
Exactly. I'm chill now. Bye.
Yeah. It's almost like combining a runner's high with a really epic hug. You're like, it's such a unique combination to get.
We've got the heart rate up. We've done a little bit of exercise. The endorphins are pumping. Yeah.
It's just so warm, and everyone should get this hug. It's so good. You know, like it's that whole feeling. It's a really unique combo, and I'm not sure how else you'd get that. Do you know what I mean? It's a very physiologically unique situation.
No. Lucky us. Lucky humans.
We can do some pretty amazing stuff. And I love how science is starting to put what our bodies can do on paper. And we stand back and go, whoa, just that one beautiful thing we've done with nature for many, 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 many millennia has all this amazing medicinal benefit for our health and our well-being. Who knew?
Humans are so funny. Like, nature's been doing this stuff for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years. And then us, like, we put lab coats on, call ourselves scientists, and we're like, hey guys, we've made a groundbreaking discovery. Women orgasm, and it's good. You heard it here first.
Right? I love it how, I don't know, for me, I will see it on paper and go, oh, duh. Like, makes complete sense, because you can kind of zoom out completely, add your experience to it and go, well, yeah, I didn't actually need science to tell me that, but thanks for the confirmation, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Totally.
So thinking of, I guess more down their care, you mentioned about Queen V and the vaginal microbiome. I think many of us have only just heard about the word microbiome and are like, what is that? Oh, it lives in my gut. So to bring another microbiome to the table, do you want to tell us a bit more?
Sure. So the gut has done gut and gut health in general, and the raising awareness around that over the past few years has done a really good job for the little guys that make up everything about who we are. And because the reality is that we are made up of trillions of bacteria that live in and outside of us. And so it's not as if we have isolated regions within the body where bacteria are, such as in the gut, and that's only where they are. They're literally everywhere, in and out, top to bottom, you name it, there's probably a microbiome for it. And the reason why we are putting a spotlight on the vaginal microbiome is linked to the gut microbiome and even the brain, because what happens in our gut microbiome and actually our microbial makeup in general influences our mentality, mental health, everything like that. So we're interested in taking care of you from here all the way down. Here being my head, down being down there. Just to be clear. And so the vaginal microbiome is actually fascinating. Yeah. The vaginal microbiome is actually fascinating. And men also have a sperm microbiota, which is also interesting to look into. And so it's not that we're the only ones having fun down there. But the vaginal microbiome controls all sorts of things, from our likelihood of getting infections like BV, thrush, yeast infections, even STDs. Like, you can basically think of your vaginal microbiome as a defense for that part of your body. You know, around all of our various entryways into our bodies, we want to have strong defenses. And down there, our vaginal microbiome is one of the things that helps defend us from invaders and infections. And so the stronger and richer and more diverse in certain ways that your vaginal microbiome is, the better it's going to be to prevent infections. And that doesn't mean that, you know, if you have sex with someone with chlamydia and you've got a really great vaginal microbiome, you're not going to get chlamydia, because that's not how things work. But it does mean that you're set up to be able to fight that a little bit better than maybe someone who has more of an imbalanced vaginal microbiome. And when we were developing Queen Bee, I actually kind of thought that this was going to be our most niche product. But having brought it out, the response to it was wild. And it's now our bestseller because it seems as though so many women are actually dealing with thrush, candida, and recurring bacterial vaginosis on a regular basis, and UTIs. And they need support down there. And again, it's one of those things that nobody talks about. And then another important conversation around the vaginal microbiome is pregnancy and postnatal. So during pregnancy, I remember when you taught me this, Lisa, it absolutely freaking blew my mind. So feel free to add to this. But when you taught me about how during pregnancy, the gut microbiome translocates to the vagina to bring more diversity, richness, and population to the vaginal canal, so that when a baby is birthed through and gets there, they get all of the good vaginal juices all up in them. Basically, what we're doing is laying down their gut microbiome that will impact their health for the rest of their life. So by working on your vaginal microbiome and gut microbiome while you're pregnant, you're doing incredible things for the health of your child, just incredible. And that goes for breastfeeding as well. So some of the strains that we've got in Queen Bee are also super beneficial for breastfeeding and laying down that first kind of gut microbiome for baby, as well as nurturing mum's health as she heals and grows, and immunity for both of them. So yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff once you start diving into the vaginal microbiome, the influence that has on other microbiomes in the body, how they're all connected but all different. It's magic.
Massively. And how that can impact some really crucial moments in time, like you mentioned. Like, I'm incredibly passionate about nourishing babies from the very get-go and pre-planning that kind of stuff, because I think the more you can set a little person up for quality of life from the very beginning, i.e. quality of the egg that adds to the sperm and then the environment they grow in, you just mitigate a whole bunch of issues in terms of their journey with health long term. And it's not to say that you can't intervene at any stage. Like, we do some amazing work in our clinical practice with very little people and beyond. But I think as a mum, if you know and you have the option to, why not? Yeah,
exactly. And if you didn't know and you didn't have the option, that's all good too. Yeah. We're all just doing our best. But you know now.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. I think, that even for me, that the research around that vaginal microbiome setup in terms of the risk of BV during pregnancy and the risk of that causing a miscarriage or leading to a miscarriage it's huge. To be able to help somebody through just a probiotic is amazing, but also to know that vaginal microbiome setup, or that initial microbiome setup you can give to baby, can mitigate things like eczema, asthma, and hay fever. So the allergy triad that a lot of kids have these days, that's really down to microbiome health. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff in this space, and I'm stoked that science is willing and happy to research it and to trial it on that demographic in particular. I think it's a demographic where we as health practitioners often go, oh, I'd love to, but I'm not allowed to because no one's done the study to say that's safe. Yeah. So to have a probiotic as an option, life-saving.
I completely agree. And, a lot of the studies that I find myself looking at more and more around some of these areas of women's health, they're like 2019, 2021, 2017. They're all really, really recent. And I am just so happy that there is a new wave of research being done around women's health and female bodies, because it's been such a gap in literature for so long. So it's really nice to see there being such an interest in this space, because it's so sorely needed.
Yeah, massively agree. And I think just for anyone listening out there, Queen V, we use that in our clinical practice all the time with some really incredible results. It's one of our clinicians' favourite probiotics. So just saying, if you've got any issues down there, if you're going through pregnancy, planning a baby, breastfeeding, looking after small children and beyond, it's a great one to have in your toolkit. And it's cute and it's pink. That's the part that gets me the most.
That was the other thing. I was like, is it going really well because it's pink? But I think the reviews and the people getting in touch with us and telling us how well it's gone for them. Okay, I was like, okay, it's not just that it's pink.
It's pink and it works. Got it. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So it's been a really nourishing conversation. Thank you so much. I want to leave our listeners with some nourishment as well. So what are the 3 key things that you would ask them to do or advise them to do to help with their hormonal health and sexual well-being?
Number 1 has got to be some kind of stress management. A lot of people will probably roll their eyes and be like, oh, duh, whatever. But seriously, whether it's a therapist or journaling, walking, yoga, gratitude practice, breathing, meditation, I don't care what it is. There's so many options to choose from, but just pick one and do it regularly. Like we were saying way back at the start of this conversation, stress and our hormones and how we feel and our libido are so intertwined. And I don't know anyone who isn't stressed these days or who doesn't have a busy life or isn't running, a few percent over what they would probably comfortably do. So adding in a regular daily practice that can help with that, game changer. So that's number 1. Number 2 is balance your exercise. So if you're not doing any movement because life's too busy or you've never been able to find a good routine or whatever, I would really encourage you to give it another go. And that doesn't mean that you have to be going to the gym for an hour every day of the week. That might be starting off with a free half-an-hour yoga class on YouTube or going for a short walk or whatever it is. We don't need to be absolutely smashing ourselves in order to get the amount of exercise that our bodies, our immune systems, our hormones, our sex drives would like us to be doing. Exercise is just such an incredible healer. But on the flip side of that, I say balance your exercise because we also don't want to be going too wild on the HIIT and intense side of things. Extreme exercise in that way for many women on a long-term basis, done super regularly, isn't great for a lot of us. I'm a big fan of HIIT, but balancing maybe maximum 3 classes a week with something more restorative like yoga or Pilates or walking or that kind of thing, so that we're getting our parasympathetic nervous system really into it as well as a nice balance. So that's number 2. And number 3 would be using herbs and nutrients to support your body when you do need a little bit of extra help, because we are all so busy and because we're living full lives and we want to feel our best. There are times where we won't be feeling that great. And, this was me literally a couple of months ago. I was like, oh, the hormones are on the blink again. But because I've done so many hormone tests and because I've worked with you for so long, I'm like, okay, Han, you know what you need to do. And there are, certain nutrients or products or whatever that I will go to at times when I need, that I know are just there in my toolkit and that I can pull on when I need to. Because sometimes it's nice to have that little bit of extra scientifically backed help.
Amen to that. I love that. That's really a nice sounding off. A bit of mindfulness, a little bit of movement, and then getting your mojo up with a little bit of extra support as and when required. Love the little package. Thank you so much for your time today, Beatrice. It's been an absolute pleasure and a wonderful chat. We hope to have you again soon.
Thanks, Lace. Love you.